guys, welcome to or welcome back to my channel, depending. My name is Jen. I am a writer, a spiritualist, I have a chronic illness, I'm autistic, I make content about everything. But today's video is about one of my true loves, which is academics. Academia is, a huge part of my life, and this year I'm applying for PhD programs in the UK and in Ireland, and I thought now is the time to do my academic journey so far kind of video. So yes, like, subscribe, get a cup of tea, join me. That's enough of an intro. So naturally, I am going to probably talk about this in the only way I can talk about anything, which is fictional characters. I'm going to look at my behaviour throughout. Mostly I'm looking at my university experience. So for those of you who don't know, I did a diploma and undergrad, and I'm on my second master's degree at the moment. But briefly, we'll touch on secondary school, just purely because it's relevant to show my interests have lasted a long time, I guess. So secondary school for me was a very fun time. Now I'm saying that, I'm like, was it though? Was it though? I just made some great friends who are still my friends, but it wasn't that fun. It was okay. It was an okay time. I felt very academically challenged. I'm somebody who's intelligent, but I do have to work very hard. I never really understood why I had to work really hard to perform as well as my friends in exams. And it's, obviously only now I realise that I have ADHD and I'm autistic, and I used to find sitting in an exam hall incredibly stressful, just purely because of the amount of noise and the amount of people shuffling papers and coughing and breathing. And if I got a chair that had a slight scratch in the back of it, it would really bother me and affect my performance. So the fact that I did get incredibly high grades always, I think is just probably more of a mark of how stressed I was, how much pressure I put myself under. My interests in secondary school are my interests now. I was incredibly interested in anything languages, literature, English, German, anything to do with words I really liked. I could learn STEM subjects, I could learn science-based subjects. I found them interesting to a degree, but then I also found them incredibly lifeless. I was really more about, I guess, what was the words, creativity. I remember really struggling with maths, and coming home and telling my mom I was struggling with maths, and she would ask what we covered in class, and I would have sat through the whole class reading some junior Cert's copy of Romeo and Juliet, because we'd be using their classroom, and I would not have a clue what we covered, but I didn't care, I just didn't care at that point in time. So yeah, that's also true. That's how it was. So that's secondary school. The leaving cert for me was an incredibly stressful time, as it is, I don't want to sound unique there, as it was for everyone. It was stressful for me because I got glandular fever at the start of the year, and my course was quite high points and quite limited places. So instead of, I guess, taking that year a bit easy to rest physically and repeating, I just pushed, and my mental health took a nosedive. But I did get into the course, which is not a moral of the story, because don't do what I did, but that's it. Long story short, secondary school, pretty solid experience, met some amazing friends, struggled to understand my style of learning, I guess, is there, but that early interest in languages and literature was always there. So okay, I'm going to call this section, which is the first year of my undergrad degree, I'm going to call this section the Unhinged Spencer Hastings section, which is specifically a type of Spencer Hastings. If you don't know Spencer Hastings from Pretty Little Liars, you missed out on an iconic character. But Spencer is a pretty academic gal and really tightly in control of everything, until I think season 3, when she just loses her marbles a bit. And I'm saying a bit like a lot, And I think this is where I was in first year. I think I was someone who looked like I was coping until I really was not coping. So my degree, I did a Bachelor of Arts with Creative Writing in the National University of Ireland, Galway, which is just NUIG, and I loved Galway instantly. Amazing experience in terms of friends, classes, loved that whole experience. However, I think because I had pushed myself so hard for the Leaving Cert to get into this course, and my art subjects were very intense because I did German, Spanish and Italian, so I actually had quite a lot of hours, class hours, and different kinds of classes that were very interactive. There was never just sitting back and taking notes, I guess. So I found those classes very intense, and I think I got there and it was like the wind was just gone out of my sails. It's like I'd pushed myself to my limit and that was it. I couldn't do anything else. I had nothing else in me. So I went through the year like Spencer Hastings in season 3 of Pretty Little Liars, where she's like going to school and she's kind of turning in stuff, but she looks like a mess the whole time. Everyone around her is looking at her like, what is wrong with you? Get it together, you know. Until ultimately I did have to, you know, talk to someone about my mental health and get that looked at more. Once again, I didn't realize I was autistic. I didn't realize that in reality I was struggling with the newness of everything and how loud everything was, the amount of socializing that was expected of me. I didn't understand any of that. But in terms of grades, I still did very well that year. I did incredibly well. I had to choose to keep on 2 of my languages out of 3, and I had originally planned to keep on Spanish and German, but the Spanish department stressed me out so much. They just freaked me out so much and I preferred Italian from the get-go. So I decided to keep on Italian, which was great. And I really, really liked that. And yeah, so first year in terms of grades, I guess if you were to look at my transcripts, looks pretty good. But my health and mental health during that time, I guess, looked like it took a bit of a nosedive. However, what remained consistent throughout all that time was my absolute love for studying. You know, I was happiest when I was alone in the library, headphones on, or in my room. I really loved my college accommodation was like the party accommodation. I was not a party gal, so well, like, I mean, I was, but I like left my accommodation to go to like very civilized parties, not like the kind of parties, you know. Anyway, but I still loved my room and just sitting in the evening at my desk and doing my work exactly as I do now. And I think that was the first time I felt really fulfilled in that aspect of my life, because I was only learning things I loved. So I think if I had known I was autistic, known I had ADHD, been able to get help for that, and managing that change at that time, I would have coped a lot better. I would have probably, I guess, not felt like I just needed to keep pushing through this adjustment that everybody else seemed to be doing better. So that's why I call it my Unhinged Spencer Hastings year, because like Spencer, I bounced back. I was doing a lot better, you know, but I still carry with me that time, I guess, if that makes sense. I'm not sure that makes sense, but we're gonna go with it. Second year of my undergrad, and also my diploma year. So I did a Bachelor's of Arts at the same time as doing a Bachelor Diploma, which is a level 6 in Spanish. So that was my way of keeping on Spanish, even though I could only keep on 2 languages, was to do the Bachelor at the same time. Bear in mind, I had absolutely no energy to do any of this, no capacity, nothing, but my love of studying was so strong. And I always knew it was incredibly strong. It was so profoundly within me. And I think it was very hard for people around me at that point to kind of look at me and say, is she doing this because she's neurotic, or does she actually enjoy studying? But in reality, I've always enjoyed it. So I'm going to call this year, second year. Second year reminds me of Blair and Serena in Gossip Girl season 1 preparing for the SATs. It's a very specific episode. So here's why. So this year is kind of my inner calm, outer exhaustion year. And that's because I had improved so much mentally between my first year and my second year. So that I was in such a better headplace when I returned to college. I was so excited to get back there, get back to everything. I still had incredibly poor physical health at that time. None of my chronic illnesses were diagnosed or managed. So I was just in massive amount of pain and, you know, crippling anxiety. I was fainting a lot. I couldn't hold down food, things like that. All of these things that I was being told was purely in my mind, which obviously now I know genetic chronic illness. But my internal world was much calmer because my mental health was much calmer, but my outer world and how I presented was I was still exhausted because I was still trying to do everything. So I like to think of my inner world as feeling a bit like Blair as I prepare for everything. Well, I mean, Blair's very neurotic, but anyway, you know, it's that scene where Blair is like getting quizzed by Dorota. Dorota's like running through definitions of words or something with her, and she's so intense and so on top of it. I felt really on top of it. I also felt internally like Serena when she's like dating Dan and just flirting, having a great time, but also studying and going to get really good results. But then outward, I looked like Serena when she actually, you know, didn't turn up for the SATs and just went out drinking with Georgina. I think on the outside it must have looked like that when I turned up to class. I must have been like a shadow of my former self turning up and looking harrowed nearly, you know. But in my head I felt like I have this because this year is so much better than last year. And it was, you know, in terms of my grades were really good this year. Creative writing was really good. My languages were pretty solid. My oral results were great. So I was doing really well academically. I was just exhausted. To me, what was an issue this year was my physical health. My physical health was a huge drawback. Everything else seemed like it was falling into place a little bit. Because I was still loved studying what I was studying. I spent a lot more time in the library than studying from home. I had a really good time, and I really started to kind of get into my stride of learning that this quiet space that you go into when you're studying something you're actually interested in was such a serotonin zone for me. And I was kind of getting more quietly confident in the fact that that was who I was meant to be, I guess. Once again, still didn't know I was autistic, didn't know I had ADHD, any of that. But yeah, so that was second year where I looked like Serena hungover, but felt like Blair and very on top of it. So I mean, mixed results, but overall, good academic experience, good social experience. My third year of my undergrad. So typically if you do a language degree, the third year of your undergrad is your Erasmus year. I'm not sure if it's that way in, you know, every language degree across the world. But I was too physically sick to go on Erasmus. I was incredibly weak. So I'm going to call my undergrad third year basically season 1, episode 1 of Gilmore Girls, Rory. No other version of Rory. I have very little time for Rory. I have very little time for Gilmore Girls. But that episode, before everything starts, because I consider it almost a time of isolation. When most of my friends were out of the country, most of my friends were doing languages, living their lives in Italy, Spain, Germany, everything. And I was in Galway trying to do a creative writing project while still feeling pretty physically crappy, but had more time for myself than ever. So I started pursuing a lot more creative projects. I'm really enjoying that. And I started to do a little bit more exercise in terms of just walking and strengthening. And I think this is the first year, probably in the second semester, when things started turning around for me physically, even though I wouldn't, at the time I didn't know that. So yeah, in terms of that year, I'm going to say I felt like Rory Gilmore, just head down, studying, taking no distractions, because I had no distractions. All of my friends, the Loreleis of my life, were busy. So I obviously still had friends in Galway, and I made a lot of friends that year, but I really prioritized myself. And it was the first year I think I really prioritized my writing, because it was the first year I completed a novel as part of my creative writing work. I received a distinction. I, met with an agent. I got some actual tangible steps about moving forward in my writing that have stood with me to this day. So that was all really, really important to me. That whole year is, in my mind, is quite a positive year, because it's the year of me, really, and the year in which I was able to sit down and realize that I loved academics and I loved writing, and I wanted to somehow do them both. So that's kind of third year. Third year was fairly uneventful, but in a good way. I went on nights out, and I made a lot of friends and stuff, but I still was so heavily prioritizing my well-being. And I really, really am glad about that. So yeah, that's third year. Quiet Rory Gilmore days before any bad decisions. We're gonna call it that. It's time for final year of my undergrad. Final year of my undergrad. All my friends are back in Galway. I was thrilled, but was really nervous that I was going to be behind academically, because I hadn't studied Italian and German abroad, and I was in conversation. I was definitely behind, so that took a lot of extra work and grinds and hours, and yeah, that just took a lot of time. It took a lot of time, but I'm going to describe this final year as specifically the last scene in, I'm not sure, is it the last scene? One of the last scenes in the last episode of The Queen's Gambit, where I think Beth Harmon is wearing she's wearing this white coat and white hat, and it's she's just won, but she just walks out of this chess competition and walks down through the streets and sees all of these, normal people, not geniuses, playing chess. And it's the first moment she takes stock of the world and is able to say, this is a world I can live in. And I feel like my whole final year was a moment for me, was that long walk where I was able to look at the life I had led and the life I wanted to lead, and I could see how I could get there for the first time. So my health basically started turning around. My grades were really good in final year. My final year was pretty strong academically. To be fair, every year was strong for me academically. I'm a very consistent student, but I wasn't getting firsts in everything because, well, I was sick for, I was spending a lot of time in hospital and bed and things like that. So but I was still doing really well academically, and my health turned around. I had so much more energy. I was planning to go to Tanzania that summer after graduating. I acted in a German play. I made so many friends. I had such a good social life. I had so much energy. It was really probably the best year of my college experience was my final year, because I felt so authentically and strongly myself for the first time. And now where I stand, a few years later, I can see I'm so much stronger in that now than I was then, but that was the beginning, the echo of where I'm at now. And I really, really value that. So that scene of Beth Harmon just walking out, that was me for final year. I continued writing. I kept, the discipline that I learned in my third year of doing my creative project. I really loved my languages. I did well academically. I was able to, I felt like for the first time I was standing on my own 2 feet quite strongly. And that was hugely important for me. So that was my final year. Okay, I know I ended the last clip on a positive note. We're being Beth Harmon, we're having our moment walking down the street after playing chess or something. But now we're talking about my master's degree, number one. So after I graduated from my undergrad, I took a year off and worked. I was going to go straight into a master's degree. Everyone around me told me that I was just doing that to avoid life. That I was, I suppose, going to enjoy not having to study. And And I think I can see where people were coming from, but I also think they just didn't realize that I actually enjoy this, that academics is probably predominantly where my joy comes from when it's not writing based. So I just worked. And also it was good to physically take a break, even though I could not wait to get back. I really wanted to get back. So when I started my degree, my master's degree, to pay for it, I had to work full time. So I did a part-time master's in speech, language and communication needs in Galway as well. And I'm gonna call this my year of being like Hermione in The Prisoner of Azkaban, when she's wearing the time turner and overschedules herself and is basically exhausted all the time. That basically says how I did. So first year of my master's degree, I was doing pretty well, but I was pretty stressed all the time. I did not have a social life. I went to work, I studied, I stayed up late, I cried, I panicked. I really wasn't sure if this master's, like if academics was for me. This was a big moment of doubt because I found, now I realise I was just doing some classes I didn't like, and the classes I did like, I loved. So, you know, but at the time I suppose it caused a level of panic, and there's also a lot of pressure to enjoy it when you're paying for it yourself, sacrificing your social life and your time to do it. Grades wise, my first year was not that strong. It was relatively strong in terms of my research. My papers were not poor, but like, you know, I got 2 1s when I was definitely putting in as much effort as I ever had been before. So I felt like maybe that was another reason I worried that academics wasn't for me, basically, was that my grades weren't great. And they were still very high, but like my version of not great meant imperfect, you know. So moving into second year, I did my dissertation all through, I did my dissertation, which was a literature review based dissertation, all through the pandemic. And I felt probably like very low during this time. I felt pretty low. I started a new job that I did entirely from home, and it was quite a stressful role. I mean, I think that's when I started my channel, so you could probably look back and see some of those days. And I did my thesis around that time, and I found the writing of it incredibly non-engaging, just simply because it was all by myself in a room, rather than being able to go to a library, to talk to a professor, I spoke to my advisor, you know, over email, and we had calls and things, but it still didn't really feel like I was doing it. And I did get pretty good results in it and my overall master's degree, but I don't know if I could say I enjoyed it, because throughout year 1 I felt overscheduled simply because I was, and year 2 felt incredibly isolated due to the pandemic, but we've all had that experience. So I am Hermione sitting at the desk, you know, stressed at night, having entirely done this to myself, but at the same time I'm Hermione probably like who's a little bit depressed and needs to hang out with friends and things like that. But that was just the way the pandemic, you know, was for everyone. So it's not really that wild. Let's talk about my second master's degree, which is the one I'm doing right now. I did not intend to do a second master's degree. I had pretty much always been, from very early in my undergrad career, doing a PhD had felt very natural because I love academics and academia and that environment. And having the one master's degree, you know, is pretty much enough. But I felt during the pandemic, I think signed up for, I'm trying to even think how I got into this master's. Through work, a master's came up in University College Cork in business and life coaching, and my work offered to pay for it, and I was really interested in it, so I said I'd give it a go. The first half of it being just a diploma, a PG dip, so, you know, we could see if we liked it and then just leave it at that and not go any further. And I fell in love with it. I've fallen in love with life coaching. Life coaching feels like such a natural fit for me, especially when I talk to people who specifically are, neurodiverse or chronically ill, things like that. People who just maybe need to talk about strategies in their lives to get where they want to go, with someone who understands. So that's where my second master's is, and I am hoping I'll be doing my dissertation next year in probably between February and June of next year, and that will hopefully go well. I'm going to look at narrative coaching, which is interpreting the stories coachees tell themselves, and basically how our inner beliefs form our outer world and all of that. So that's basically that. And then I'm going to be applying for PhD programs this side of Christmas. So I'm applying for a few different programs. I'm looking at programs that are literature based plus, I guess, what am I saying? Sorry, I literally just based, that are literature based plus creative writing based. I'm combining the two, and my aim is that by this time next year, well, no, not by this time next year, that as I complete this master's and move into a PhD, if I get accepted, I am applying for a few MPhil programs as well that will lead into a DPhil PhD program. So, but as I continue this, my aim is that, obviously the aim is that I'm me and not a fictional character, but that I feel like Elle Woods, when she's learning for the LSAT, to get into law, is it the LSAT? I'm not sure. to get with Warner, but then she basically does incredibly well in law school in her own right, and just feels so her and gets into her stride. That's where I'm aiming to be. That's where I feel like I'm building to with this master's degree. This master's degree is definitely the best I've ever done grades wise, because it's very psychology based. It requires a lot of reading, literature. It's as difficult as the first master's, but in an entirely different way. So this is the best I've done grades wise ever. I'm kind of getting firsts and everything, so hopefully I get a first overall. I'll have to see. But yeah, so that's kind of where I'm hoping to get with my PhD dreams, where ultimately my research is aiming to be around the idea of representations of autistic women in Irish and British literature, either contemporary or historical, just simply because nobody's ever looked at that before, and I find that incredibly fascinating. I obviously have ideas about how I want to whittle that down, narrow it down. I particularly am interested in representations of female love, female passion, women's relationships, women's sexuality, queerness, everything. So I just really, really want to look into all of that. So I'm applying for a few different programs, and if I don't get in this year, that'll be absolutely fine. Or for next year. So I suppose I'll be applying this side of Christmas 2021, and if I am accepted, I won't start until October 2022. So if I don't get in for this year, that's absolutely fine, and I can, wait on. Obviously I have my dreams and things I want to do, but I'm also very much trusting the universe here in terms of plans and what the universe has out there. So yeah, that is my video, and that is my academic journey so far. And if anyone, to be honest, is interested in this, like and subscribe and all that, but I really wanted to make this as a log of a moment of time of how I feel about my academic journey so far, especially when it's something I'm going to be continuing probably for a while. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you guys soon. Bye.